Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you're listening to this. My name is Winston, the content marketing guy. And today I have an absolutely amazing guest. I guess I'm very delighted to have on our podcast conversation with marketers, Mr. John Espirian. I hope I'm pronouncing that
You
correctly.
pronounced it perfectly, Winston. Thank you for having me. This is the most glamorous and distant location I've been podcasting on recently. So, yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
It's truly an honor to have you. So before we actually begin, let me just, tell you guys a bit about John. So he started out as, a math and an IT major. He's an experienced technical copywriter and entrepreneur of Espirian, which is a writing and editing service company business. He's a published author, and I'm sure he'll talk more about his book shortly. His new book, Content DNA. I'd love for him to dive into more about what that is later on. But I can safely say the reason why, I really wanted to have John on this podcast is because I consider him a LinkedIn influencer, someone who's definitely an authority in LinkedIn. So what you guys will find is that this conversation will center a lot around LinkedIn because very few people, in my opinion, really understand LinkedIn in terms of having a structure and a framework of how to make it work. I mean, even if you see a lot of people who, they have a lot of engagement, they say they're getting results from LinkedIn, I found that they aren't able to duplicate it with someone else. It's just, it works for them, but how do you duplicate it for someone else, which is what I really want John to get into. So, John, once again, happy to have you. And really where I want to start before we get into all the technical stuff, the LinkedIn stuff, is just to share your journey of, where you started and how you actually ended up where you are now, where, everyone, not just myself, but everyone considers you a LinkedIn influencer.
Thank you again for having me. So the whistle-stop really quick version of this is that I started as a software and hardware tester. I was made redundant about 10 years ago, and I took my superpower skill, which is explaining how things work, and turned it into a copywriting business where I would explain how businesses use run their products and services and processes. And about 3 years ago, I wasn't getting any results from social media. And I thought, because I work in B2B and because LinkedIn is a B2B platform, I'm going to focus all of my energies in one place instead of spreading myself really thinly. And then I dived into LinkedIn and I used my skill of explaining how things work to explain to people how LinkedIn works. So as I was changing settings, trying things, I would run my own experiments and report on them to others. And over time, that started to get me more and more engagement, a bigger network. And since then, I've just been really deep on the platform, showing up with the same kind of brand identity all the time. And now I've become known for being that helpful guy on LinkedIn who shares lots of free tips and articles. So that's been the focus of the last 3 years of my social media journey. And I think it's much better to do it that way than to try and be everywhere, because a lot of the really big influencers want you to try and be everywhere, but they've got a media division behind them. They've got someone filming them 24 hours a day. Most business owners don't have that. You can just be good in one place first. And if you've got the time and the energy, you can be good in other places afterwards. But build it in one place first, I think. And for me, LinkedIn has been great because it's not as busy as the other social media platforms. So it's a great place to stand out still, even in 2020.
Yeah, and I love that you made the point about being on one platform and really mastering that platform. Even if you decide you want to build in other places, other channels, but really starting out there, which is an excellent point. Because I say this a lot, that just because you hear certain influencers giving certain advice doesn't necessarily mean it's the best advice for you. So my thing is always, test out, even if you get the advice, test it out for yourself first see if it makes sense for you, and if it does, then you can adopt it. If it doesn't, then you can just disregard it. So you mentioned that you were on LinkedIn for the past 3 years. Was it easy in the beginning? Did you just jump on LinkedIn?
Because I didn't have an engaged audience and I wasn't known on the platform. So what had really happened is that in the year before I jumped on LinkedIn, I was studying content marketing. I was understanding that we need to be the best teacher we can be for our ideal clients and to be known in one space. And I'd seen lots of people do it successfully. So I knew it would work so long as I was committed to sticking with it, and I was. I started on LinkedIn at the beginning of 2017 properly, and nothing happened for the first 9 months. Nothing. I mean, really. No clients, very little engagement, and I was doing all of the right things.
Right.
And if I hadn't had that education, I would have said, hey, this is not working. I'm wasting my time here. But 3 years on, I'm still doing the same things. I'm still turning up the same number of times each week. I'm still posting the same kind of helpful content. But now I'm known. And once you start to build an audience, it becomes really easy to just keep doing that good thing. But when you've got that big rock that you're trying to push and it's totally static, it takes a long time to get it rolling. And very often, and for many of my copywriting clients as well, it's too long for them to be patient, So I find a lot that people will say, okay, all right, let's do a marketing plan. It'll last a couple of months. We'll write 5 blog posts. And then they think they're going to be at the top of Google earning all this money. And it takes longer than that. All of the people who've been an overnight success have been doing this thing for years. And I was involved, very gladly involved, in a book by Mark Schaefer called Known. He interviewed almost 100 people, and on average they took 2.5 years, 30 months, to go from nothing to being known in their industry, right? 30 months. It's a long time, but if you plan your business to be around for 10 years, 20 years, it's worth the effort. So it was hard because I wasn't getting any results to start with. But I tell everyone, you've got to stick at it for this to work. There are 2 main things in my book: consistency and congruence. And it's that consistency thing that people just don't have the appetite for. They want results tomorrow. They want results yesterday. They're not going to get them, okay? You can spend a lot of money on ads and get visible quickly, but it's a big expense to keep doing that forever. If you build a bank of content and slowly start putting it out just consistently, you'll eventually become known. You just need to have faith in the process and know that if you keep doing that, eventually it will work out for you. So yeah, it was hard at first. It's really easy in comparison now because I know that it generates results.
Right. And I'm happy that you mentioned the fact that it took you such a long time, and even that study that you just mentioned, interviewing 100 people and finding out that it takes about 30 months, because for the individual as well as the business, from the individual standpoint, people hear these stories. People say, hey, I jumped on LinkedIn and within 6 to 9 months, it blew up for me. And I'm not saying these stories aren't true. Some of these stories are true, but a lot of people miss the point that, that's not the norm. That's the exception. Like when you hear those stories of people coming on and building an incredible audience in 6 to 9 months, that's the exception. That's not how it works for everyone. So I'm glad you actually came on and mentioned that. And even for the businesses because I've been in situations where, we're invested in content marketing. They're not seeing the results like the first 30 days. And you're like, listen, let's just focus on sales. Let's just go out there, knock on doors, cold call, cold emails, because clearly this thing isn't working. But as you mentioned, it takes some time. It takes that consistency to eventually build up to that point where it starts to pay dividends.
Yeah, I mean, there's a link to something in real life, which is if you want to get a great body and you go to the gym 3 times and then you think, well where are all my muscles? It doesn't work like that, does it? Right. So you've got to do it for a while for it to pay off. And it's the same kind of idea. It's just, as a friend of mine said, reps build muscle. Okay, so you've just got to keep going, keep going, keep going, and commit to the process, and it will eventually work.
I know you touched on it on a very high level, but I don't know, was there like a process of how you were able to grow that LinkedIn following and engagement over those 3 years? Like, did you actually have like a framework to say, all right, step one, do with it. Step two, I mean, probably back then you didn't know, but like how you have clients that you're trying to do the same thing for.
At the start, it's a very kind of scattergun approach where you're making connections, but you're not really thinking strategically. What you really ought to be doing if you're starting from zero now is to go and look in your industry for the people who are writing and doing videos about the topics that you're interested in and that you know something about, your core business, and start commenting on that content, because that content has already got visibility. You don't have visibility. But if you go and comment on someone's post who has some visibility and you say something really meaningful, helpful, interesting, then the second and third level connections of the people looking at that content will see it, even though you personally don't have any visibility. They'll see it because of the effect of that person's reach already, right? So they'll go, who's saying that? Who is this guy? And that is a great way of introducing yourself to people who are interested in that topic, which might be potential clients, right? Another thing to do is to look for, LinkedIn search used to be good on mobile. It's actually pretty good on desktop now, is to go and look for the people that you most want to influence and then try and comment on their content as well, and then make connections with them. So for example, if I'm working in a B2B writing sphere, I'm the kind of people I want to influence are people like chief technical officers, maybe, and I want to work mostly in the UK, so I might look for people in London. So I can go and do a search on LinkedIn for chief technical officer as a role, London as a location, and then I can sort the people and look for who's active on LinkedIn, who's actually posting stuff, and try and post my comments on their content so that I get on their radar, and then go and introduce myself to them through an invitation. Because otherwise, if I just do a direct cold approach, they don't know me from anyone, especially if I've got a small network myself. So the starting point should be to look for people who are already creating content and just put your authority, put your knowledge into those feeds as much as you can. And also to mix it with creating your own content, so you start to build a bank of answers, right? So it's not just commenting on other people's, it's creating your own. Because one of the best things to do is that when you see a question from a customer or a question from a colleague that's relevant to your business, if you create some helpful content around that, then you show that you're the kind of person who knows the problems that people are having and that you have a solution for it. So one of the best things is when people ask me a LinkedIn question, for example, and I can go, oh, hey, I made a video about that. Hey, I did a blog post about this. Hey, here's a PDF about this thing.
Right.
That signals to them, this guy knows this stuff. He's already done it. He's already probably answered this question 1,000 times before. That means that they're going to trust me the next time they've got a question like that. And if they need to hire someone in that space, why wouldn't they hire the guy who's answered all the questions already instead of someone they don't know? So this takes some time, right? Creating content is not quick. On average, there's a survey that's quoted in my book. The average blog post now takes almost 4 hours to create. Okay, so this is not, it's not a small piece of time in a working week. If you're trying to create this stuff yourself, as well as just managing your social media and doing your core business. So it does take time to do this, but it's well worthy. So start with comments, try and make relevant connections with the people you want to influence, and start, if you can, creating content. There's an important thing about this that I mention in the book, which is that there are 3 levels of people on LinkedIn, really. There's the consumers, which is most people. Right. There's the contributors, and there's the creators. And I use an example of an art gallery in the book. So the consumers are the people who go to the art gallery and they look at the painting on the wall and they go, oh, isn't that nice? And the contributors are a bit more visible than that. They're a bit less anonymous. They're the people who put up the lights and they put up the velvet ropes and they hang the paintings on the wall. They're more visible. They're more important. And then there's the creators, the people who actually paint the paintings, the Da Vinci's, right? They're the ones who get all the credit. No one goes to a museum to say, hey, I stood next to someone and look at a painting. They go, I went to see Da Vinci, right? So you want to try and jump from that consumer bit to the creator bit, because it's the creators that get all of the credit in the end. They're the ones who get remembered. And there's very, very few creators on LinkedIn. You know, we're just talking about a few million people in total, and yet LinkedIn's got almost 700 million members. So it's a tiny, tiny proportion of people who make stuff on LinkedIn. So if you can be in that zone, you've got a much better chance of winning than someone who is just watching and looking and reading and maybe learning, but they never show up. No one knows who they are. So you're not going to get business through social media if that's all you do.
Right. And the reason why I laugh is because when you create it or when you put things into perspective, because from where I sit, you know, I would argue that almost everyone is creating content on LinkedIn these days, even if it's just a text post. But then when you mention that there are over 700 million people on LinkedIn, then it puts it into perspective that, well, really and truly within my network, it's probably only the same 50 people that creates content every day, or at least once a week, if so much.
Yeah.
So
the fact that people don't contribute as much as you might think, you know, it feels as though LinkedIn's really, really busy maybe, but most people stay quiet. But they're still important in the whole mix, because those are the people, the quiet people are the ones who are watching and judging and eventually turning into customers. And I've lost count of the number of times that people connect with me and then they say, oh, we've got a job for you and we've been following you for 18 months. And I'm like, who are you? I never heard of you before, right? So those people are still important. And that's what you have to remember. When you first start creating content and no one's engaging, I can tell you that people will be watching. They won't be saying anything, but they are there. You have to talk to those people. Otherwise, in 18 months, when they've got a chance to hire someone, who will they have been watching? If you're not creating the content, they'll be watching someone else and hiring someone else. So the time to start really is now.
Yeah, and you made a brilliant point. I was actually planning to create content around that very same thing that you just said, that a lot of people think that just because they're not getting engagement, because just like you, like my first, I would say 4, maybe 5 months of creating I've always been on LinkedIn, but in terms of creating content consistently, I really started diving into that February last year, which is 2019.
Yeah.
And for those first 4 to 5 months, there was little to no engagement. I mean, I was getting probably only 1 like per post, and it was from the same guy from India. Like, I don't know the guy, but for some reason, he's that one person that always liked every single thing I posted. And, you know, to this day, I still appreciate him, because he kind of gave me that start, that momentum, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I can give you an example in the stats, right? When I started, because I log all of my statistics, because I really like to look at the numbers and see what's happening, okay? When I started in 2017, I was getting about 90 profile views in the measured period, which is 90 days. So it's the last 3 months. It tells you how many profile views you've had. And I remember when I started, the figure was 90. So that means I was getting 1 profile view per day. Right now, it's like 4,500 in the 90-day period. So it's about 45 times more, right? So that obviously is going to increase my potential for getting new clients, but it takes ages to build up to that, okay? So you just need to think about everyone starting from 0, you know. Justin Bieber had 0 followers on day 1 because no one knows who he is, but you keep creating stuff, you will keep showing up and providing something of value. So you don't want to be salesy with your content. This is the number 1 mistake I see on LinkedIn when people make content. In fact, the 2 main mistakes are either they make something really boring, like, hey, we're at a trade show, or hey, we took on a new employee. Like, who cares? No one cares, okay? Because that's not helping anyone.
Right.
Or they just go, yeah, we've got our new offer available this week, buy now. And that will turn people off a lot as well. So you need to create something that will be memorable and will be comment worthy. That's the most important thing you can do. The comments are the most important measure of success on LinkedIn in terms of getting your engagement up. They're more important than likes. They're even more important than shares. Much more important to get people to comment, because if you comment, that tells LinkedIn people are spending time contributing to this post. Okay, so they're pouring minutes and hours into adding to this post. That means that it must be good, because it takes a second to click the like button, but it might take 30 seconds to write a decent comment. So that comment is worth more time. And so LinkedIn will see lots of comments. Okay, we need to show this to more people. So you need to create content that starts a conversation. All content is a conversation starter. So you become the conversation starter. You start that fire, and then people sit around your campfire and they talk. And if you can do more of that, you'll get lots of engagement. But it'll take a while to build the fire. That's all. Build the attractiveness of that fire. So just get started, create content, and build conversation.
All right. So, well, really, really great nuggets. So there's one thing I want to get to a question, and then there's another one, because based on two things that you just mentioned, in terms of the what's comment worthy, but I'll get back to that question shortly. But since you mentioned it, you mentioned about two things that people shouldn't do. So give us one more in terms of things that people shouldn't do on LinkedIn, or mistakes that they make, as well as three things that people should be doing.
Okay. Well, one thing they definitely shouldn't do is try and game the algorithm, because there's a lot of that going on. So people will join, for example, engagement pods, and it means that you get into like a private chat arrangement with people where you say, you post something and I'll comment and like it. And then I post something and you comment and like it, and there'll be a group of 20 people and they're all just commenting and liking on their own stuff, right? To try and fool LinkedIn in thinking, oh, this has got good engagement, this must be worthy. But LinkedIn is getting smarter with this kind of thing. If it sees the same group of people commenting and liking early on, it will be a signal that could be something that is trying to trick the algorithm, and you could get your account suspended because of that. So don't do that. And also, because these pods tend to be filled with people who don't all work in the same industry, they might work in lots of different things. You have to be careful that whenever you like and comment on something, some of your followers will see that thing that you've liked and commented, and it might not be relevant to your business. So they might think, well, why is this guy commenting on that? I don't care. I'm not following him for that. They might unfollow you. So it's a bad thing to do. And another couple of really bad things are to connect with a lot of people very, very quickly. So it's good. It's good that you build a network, but if you build it too fast, you won't have a chance to get to know people. Okay, so some LinkedIn trainers say, go and connect with 100 people a day, go and connect with 200 people a day. I don't believe in that at all. I think you should connect with fewer, maybe five people a day would be enough, so long as you get a chance to actually speak with them, make a connection, read their profile, understand what's going on in their lives, and try and be a person of value to that person. That's the way to build an engaged network. So don't try and build it too fast, because you won't get to know the people you're connecting with, and that's bad, because maybe some of them aren't the kind of people that you really want to connect with. You want to connect with people who will chat with you, who will support your content, not just people who are chasing the numbers. So that's a really, really important thing to do. And my number one tip for what to do is something that I've kind of already touched on, which is that you should engage in more conversations, both publicly through comments and privately through direct messages. Direct messages are fantastic, and I think they're underused, and often people's experience with them is bad because people are selling at them. But if you just start conversation, I often, when I make a connection with someone, if I can see that they're willing to chat a little bit, then I will send them a quick video intro that's less than, it's only about 30 seconds long, just to say hello, who I am, I've got a book, thanks for connecting on LinkedIn. We'll speak soon. Thanks and goodbye. That's it. But it's enough for people to see me animated. They get a kind of view of my visuals. It's something memorable, something a bit different. So starting conversations like that is really important. And also it signals to LinkedIn that you're interested in that connection. And so maybe they'll see more of your content in the future. And one of the best ways of achieving that is to try and do things that will spark the imagination to want to start a conversation. So, for example, in your headline, I recommend you've got 120 characters in your headline. I recommend saving the last 20 characters of those and just put something a little bit different in. Something that's a bit personal, something that's a bit different, like a really weird hobby that you've got, or some kind of special music that you like that's just different. Just something that will get people on your side, and maybe they'll start a conversation around that. So it's a really important thing to have conversation starters that you can hook onto. And also I say on my LinkedIn profile, I've got a secret word written on my LinkedIn profile, and I say, if you've read my profile, mention this word.
I know what
mention this word. you know what it is. So you mention this word, and it's just another thing, like, oh, I'm going to mention that, I'm going to start a conversation with him. And if you can get into more of those things, you'll have a more chance of making a good impression and being memorable. And that's what it's all about, is being memorable. If people can remember you, you've got a much better chance of doing business with them in the future, or being referred for work. Yeah.
And I'm happy that you mentioned that, because I didn't even remember it until you mentioned it just now. But when I saw it for the first time, I thought it was very clever that like within your About Me section, you mentioned the word pineapple.
That's the one.
So that's the word.
You remembered it. Yeah.
That's very clever. I like that. I like that.
Here's another tip for you. Your About section has been expanded. It used to be 2,000 characters. It's 2,600 now. You've got 600 more characters to fill. You could put more information about your services. You could put some more testimonials in there, some more keywords, so you can just develop that to make it more authoritative and more appealing to your ideal customer. Because what I always say is that your content tells, but your profile sells. So your profile is where you need to show your very best self, show all of your awards, qualifications, recommendations, all of your experience. And that's the place where, if you can maximize your profile views, you'll show up as someone who is authoritative in their industry and who someone wants to connect with and ultimately hire. So use that 2,600 characters, because it's really valuable in telling your business story and why anyone should remember you and kind of give a damn about you, basically. So I often find that that's really underused. Some people don't even have an about statement. I think that's such a waste. Like, you've got a brilliant chance. Someone is looking at your profile. They want to know about you. They don't just want to see your photo. So tell them something interesting. Grab them in those first 3 lines that you see before you have to click see more. Make them click that see more, and then tell them your interesting business story that will make them want to know you better and want to chat with you.
Right. So the next question I wanted to ask, based on something that you said. So you wrote about the anatomy of a successful LinkedIn post. Yep. Talk us through a bit more about that in terms of what are some of the bullet points of that, in terms of how do you create a winning LinkedIn post? So
I always think of a LinkedIn post as if it's a mini blog post. Okay, so I always start mine with an emoji and then a short headline, and imagining that headline is like a headline of a real article. It needs to be something that's interesting enough to make people click the see more link, because only some of the post will be shown before and the rest of it is hidden. So you want to get people clicking that see more link. And there's some evidence that suggests that if people click the see more link, LinkedIn records that behind the scenes and goes, oh, there's something really interesting here now. People want to read the whole thing. Let's show it to even more people. So you want to try and make that headline really engaging. And then I write in short sentences and short paragraphs. So I say 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph at most. So block it out with lots of white space, because if you just have a wall of text, it's too much. You can use emojis to try and add a bit of color. You can, put emojis as bullet items in a list to just add a bit of color to your content. And Don't tag people too much, because tag walls are really a big turn off. If you just tag lots of people for engagement, that's a bad thing to do. LinkedIn themselves say with hashtags, you should ideally leave your hashtags for the end of the post for readability, and you should use no more than 3 hashtags on a post. LinkedIn officially have said that in one of their articles, so that's something to keep in mind, because like on Instagram, maybe you use 25 hashtags in a post.
Right.
Or TikTok, you don't do that on LinkedIn. Just 2, 3 maximum, I would say. And end with a question, because you want to spark that engagement. You need comments for your post to be successful. So if you end with a question, or maybe a controversial statement, but you need someone to go, hey, I've got something to say about this. Okay, so you want them to hit the like button, leave a comment, and it should be a substantial comment. So the posts that say, hey, if you agree, type Y, if you disagree, type N, that's no good, really, because that's not an engaged comment. You want people to actually write some stuff. So it can take a bit of a while before people trust you enough to spend their time doing that. But yeah, so just short, well chunked up, end with a question, start with a catchy headline that makes people click, and don't overuse tags and hashtags.
John, one of the things I wanted, because I know you're very good at copywriting, very good at using LinkedIn to generate leads. One of the things I wanted to ask you, what are some of the steps to creating an effective B2B copy that can actually drive leads for businesses? So let's make it relevant for people who are business owners as to how they can actually use LinkedIn to create growth and support the growth of their business.
Yeah, I think this comes back to the root of content marketing, which is to try and be the best teacher that you can be in your space. So rather than being salesy in your content, you want to focus on what the real problems are of the ideal audience that you're trying to serve. That's what great content is. It identifies the audience it wants to serve and answers their real questions. So in content marketing, we often say that the most common question categories are around things like price, they're around the problems associated with a service, they're looking for reviews of certain products and services, comparisons, and things like that, and also how-to guidance. So if you can focus on answering that kind of question in your content, one of the very best sources for, one of the most common questions I get is, what am I going to write about? I don't know what to write about. And I say, well, have you got any customers already? Yes. Have they asked you questions in email? Oh yeah, we get questions all the time. Okay, so instead of answering those questions one-to-one or on the phone or by email, why not think, hey, this customer has asked a really good question. Let's turn it into a piece of content. That is fantastic, because we're past that stage where you have to keep all of your secrets to yourself. This is the old way of thinking, okay? Yeah. The old way of thinking is, I have a secret recipe. I have a secret sauce. I've got this brilliant process. I can't possibly tell anyone about it. The new way of thinking in the internet era is to say, I want people to know that I exist. I want to show my authority. And if I don't tell them the answer to whatever question they've got, someone else is going to do it. And who are they going to buy from then? Right? So I would say just share as much of your knowledge as possible in answering those questions. Look at your email inbox and sent items folder and try and create content that answers each customer question that comes in, so that the next time you give a brilliant impression, because someone's asking a question, you've already answered it. That's a brilliant place to be, because it makes people think that you're the authority in your space. You're the guy or girl who is sharing stuff that's relevant, that's helpful, that is non-salesy. That is the best way to do it. And the B2B has a bit of an advantage, I think, because there haven't been as many B2B content creators in the past. And also that the subject matter can be a little bit boring. So if you try and put some personality into your content, it stands a better chance of being noticed and remembered and preferred. And that's what the whole idea of this book is about, is doing the things that will let you be noticed, remembered and preferred. That is the reason that I'm trying to produce a congruent brand. Every time you see me, I'm always going to have this blue shirt on. I'm always going to have the same kind of values coming out in the content that I create. It's always going to look the same, feel the same, sound the same. That's what you want to do, because then you'll be associated with, oh yeah, that's that guy on LinkedIn who has the cartoons and, you know, always has that branding I recognize. It's the thing that puts you top of mind. So yeah, it's just really, really important to answer people's questions as clearly as you can with a clear personal brand identity around it. And in Content DNA, I say that you should develop 4 or 5 core brand values, and that those should come out in every piece of content that you create. So whatever your business is, you need to think about those core 4 or 5 things and make sure that they're in evidence in every piece of content. That's the best way to be remembered. You just need a few things, okay, and drill those over and over, rather than trying to jump around all over the place on lots of different platforms, trying to say lots of different things in lots of different ways. That's no way to be remembered. You just want to reduce it down to just being known for one thing, being known in one place, and just having a few things that identify the shape of you, so that every time you show up, it's always that thing. And if you run a multi-person business, everyone needs to be on board with this so that they can all buy into that idea, so that whether it's you, Winston, or one of your employees or someone else working for you, when they show up, they've got those same brand values. And that filters through to everything you do, your customer service on the phone, the messages you give on your website, the way you turn up on LinkedIn, the things that you write on your invoices, the way that your voicemail sounds when people phone you and can't get hold of you, what your packaging looks like. It all makes sense because it's always the same idea each time, repeated over and over and over. And that will just build trust, and people will remember you because of that.
All right, awesome. So a final segue as we close out this episode, John, is, you know, talk to us about, I mean, well, you already gave us a few elements in terms of what's in your book, Content DNA. You know, talk to us a bit more about the book, you know, what's in it, what people can expect from it, where can they find it, and also how can they connect with you if they want to have this discussion further.
Sure. So the 2 main ideas in the book is that you need this idea of congruence, which will go, if you've ever done lessons in mathematics, you might remember triangles that always look the same, congruent triangles. It's the idea of having a defined shape that is always the same. That's congruence. And the second one is consistency. So the book talks about the 30-month mindset that I mentioned earlier, of not just having a clear brand values, set of brand values, but always turning up with those same ones so that it will eventually start searing itself into people's brains. I then talk about my content DNA. So I'll give you an example of how I've set my brand up, and then give you some examples to think of how you can do the same yourself. And boiling that down, it comes down to a lot of introspection. You know, you look inside you to see what makes you you, what are the things that you believe in that you want to put into your business, because this book is aimed at business owners, you know, people who want to take charge of their own content, their own marketing, their own personal brand. They're not working for someone else, they're in charge, right? So we talk about defining your brand values. I give some examples of the bad things to avoid in social media, because there's so many mistakes in there. And I give you an example of a framework so that you can create your own content that stands out and gets noticed until you build your own personal brand identity. And then we talk about things like, you know, the impression that you give when you meet people, how easy it is to lose trust, some tips on how to write good content, how to edit your content, and then other things about distribution and promotion so that you get the most out of your content. So there's quite a lot in there, really. And it's almost 250 pages long. This has taken 2 years of my life to put together, but it's based on 10 years of being a copywriter and telling my clients the same things over and over again. And I know that it works because it's worked for them. So all of that has gone into the book. If you want to get a hold of it, it's pretty easy to search for on Amazon. So Content DNA, it should be available in all territories now. And for people who want to get in touch with me and have a chat about the book or about LinkedIn or copywriting or anything else, if you just search for my surname, because I've got a weird surname, so if you search for Espirian on LinkedIn, send me a personalized note, and then we can get involved in a chat, and I'd love to hear from your listeners.
All right, awesome. So, guys, for the benefit of those who may just be listening, that's Espirian, Espirian. So, John, thank you so much. So much value, so many nuggets packed in this podcast episode. I mean, even certain things that I didn't even think about, that I learned about, that I'm pretty sure I'm going to implement right now as soon as we end this podcast.
Excellent. Well, I'll be looking out for your LinkedIn profile and seeing how you change it. Good stuff.
Please. I'd love your feedback on that.
Absolutely.
But John, pleasure having you on. Thanks again for being on Conversation with Marketers.
Thank you very much for having me, Winston. Cheers.
All right, take care and all the best.